the ability to hear God. It's innate. We're born again with it. It's learned.
Okay, so he just said a bunch of things. It's innate. We're born again with it. So like people who are not born again can't hear it. And then he said it's learned. Those are all completely contradictory statements. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and this is another episode of the Mad Pastor Reacts. This week we are looking at Robert Morris. Is it God's voice or your thoughts from the Trinity Broadcasting Network? Always a reliable source for shitty preaching. I picked this because it's an interesting topic, especially since my last video last week, by the way, check it out up there, with Stephen Furtick, completely failed to address this exact question. So we're going to see if Robert Morris has anything valuable to say about it, and we're going to give him a fair shake, and I'm just going to react. I haven't watched it at all. If you want to watch it for yourself, the whole thing will be linked in the description below. And with no further ado, shall we get to it then?
You talk about that the Lord told me this and the Lord told me that. I don't know how to hear God.
Okay, so interesting setup. I hear that from a lot of conservative kind of prosperity people. The Lord told me, God told me to tell you this, and God spoke to me in this way. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he breaks it down, because I think that language is actually misleading to say God told me this and God spoke to me. That's a little misleading, because God, in my experience and in the experience of just about everyone I know, doesn't literally speak to us. So if we want to understand God, how do we understand God? This is, okay, so good setup. Let's see where it goes.
If you pray and you're still burdened, then you didn't pray, you just griped.
That's a little shitty. If you don't feel better after you pray, then you did it wrong. I don't think that's true. I think that's misleading.
Prayer is when you give him the burden, okay?
Also, prayer is a lot more than just giving God burdens. Sometimes you feel bad after a prayer because you should feel bad after a prayer. Sometimes God is confronting us and we feel conflicted, convicted, challenged. That's healthy. Just because you feel bad after a prayer doesn't mean you prayed wrong. That's bad advice. Don't listen to that.
Read somewhere in Scripture. Then I want you to write down what you think God is saying to you. I know that the Scripture has a contextual meaning. I know it has a historical meaning. So that's where we get the word exegete. It comes from a Greek word.
He kind of mispronounced the word, which is funny.
So there's a contextual exegesis, a historical exegesis, a literal exegesis, a revelational exegesis.
See, he knew he got it wrong, so he wanted to say it a bunch. I know what the word means. I know how to pronounce exegesis.
He said, I want to tell you something. I'm hearing God.
Again, it's important to identify that it's a metaphor, it's not literal. And anyone who says it's literal, I would really, really back away from them. I would treat them as though they are hearing voices in their head. So it's important to understand he's not articulating it, but he means metaphorically.
What I wrote down is exactly what I needed for that day.
Can I also just talk about the distracting background? It's weird. It's a weird choice that there's just these flashing lights while he's talking. I find my eyes constantly drawn to them. I think it's a bad choice. I wouldn't do it that way, but whatever. We're here to talk about what he's saying.
The ability to hear God. It's innate. We're born again with it. It's learned.
Okay, so he just said a bunch of things. It's innate. We're born again with it. So like people who are not born again can't hear it. And then he said, it's learned. We'll see what the rest of that sentence is, but those are all completely contradictory statements.
So we have to mature in it. So
Man, there sure are a lot of pop-ups on this video. There's a lot of like, pray with us. I have a feeling that that's where they ask for donations, and that's why that keeps coming up. I have a feeling that it's related to money.
Few ways that people talk about hearing God that I think they're immature. One of those is a message a minute. They're always hearing God. God just told me not to put salt on my food.
That's good. That's actually, I'm glad he's calling it out. I'm surprised he's calling it out. That's actually good. A message a minute is a bad way to live. God just told me not to put on my turn signal before I turned, and it saved my life multiple times, so... Yeah, that kind of stuff is crazy.
Do we want God speaking to us all the time? Yes. But when we talk about instruction, correction, children, do you want to still be giving your children instruction when they're 40? I mean, don't you want to mature?
So this is a dangerous route, like heretically, theologically speaking. And maybe it's a difference in Trinity Broadcasting Network and United Methodist theology, but I fully believe in the dependence upon God's grace. And the idea that I would grow out of the need of God's grace and instruction, that seems heretical. I mean, like, it's borderline. It's not straight up heresy or anything, but it's borderline, and it seems in conflict with some of his earlier statements.
The point and hope philosophy. People say, well, when I want a word from God, I just open the Bible, close my eyes, and point. Chapter 11.
I wish he would have had a more toothier, there's plenty in the Bible. I remember as a young kid when I was first getting into youth group and I was helping somebody kind of create, we were coming up with like a Bible study or something, and we were reading a text and it had something, it was in Deuteronomy and it was about crushing testicles. It was about, like, if you've ever done this, then crush their testicles on a grindstone. And there's plenty in the Bible that you could use that has a lot more that would make that joke land harder. And he just took the easy way out. He didn't. Chapter 11. Oh, you managed to say nothing. How'd you manage to say several words and say nothing at all? Use the Bible and all of its wonderful, chaotic violence. That's what I say.
So you have to come to the place where you learn to hear God.
You said earlier it's innate. You don't have to learn things that are innate.
Because you're a sheep. You were born with this ability.
That's a wild thing to say. You're a sheep. You're born with this ability. I think he's getting at original sin, but he didn't do a good job of articulating it. You can start to see why people who don't like Christianity don't like Christianity.
I have 3 grown and married children, and my son...
Oh, here's the prayer / fundraising efforts again. This is the 3rd time it's been in this, 13-minute video? Yeah, all right.
Son and his wife have 2 boys, and they were praying about whether to try for another child for a girl. She'd had difficult pregnancies, 2 miscarriages. I'm standing there about to speak, and the Lord said to me, Bridget's pregnant.
So again, this weird mix of the Lord said to you. Like, what do you mean? Like, you had an instinct. Discerning between our natural proclivity and our natural instincts, and is God giving me a word? You haven't offered any advice so far. It sounds an awful lot like he's not teaching people how to discern God's voice in their lives as much as he's bragging about how in tune he is with God's voice. And like, God, you should really be listening to this guy because he talks to God.
Well, it was so strong, and they even got with me later before they left the house. They said, how serious are you about this? And I said, I'm very serious. God said she's pregnant. And James said, well, she can't be pregnant. She's not pregnant. I said, well, she is pregnant.
This story must, and it needs to, and I will have a judgment in my heart against this guy if this story doesn't end with him being wrong. If he ends this story with him being wrong, good on you. That's good preaching. If he ends this story with he's right, then I hate this guy.
They went back about a month later, and the doctor came in and said, you're pregnant.
Every time I hold hope, every time I give these people an inch, they always disappoint me. What a fucking miracle worker. This guy, we should all listen to everything he says because he's magically in tune with God's voice.
Here's what's amazing. God spoke that word to save that baby's life.
That is such a shallow theology. That is such a limited understanding. So here's the prosperity thing. Here's how they keep you on the hook. Anytime things go wrong, it's because you're not listening to God. And by listening to God, he means you're not listening to me. You should be listening to me. And I proved it. Did you just hear that story I told? I'm a miracle worker. I save unborn babies. That's how in tune with God I am. And then, of course, when someone is listening and they come and they say, it's not working, things aren't really working out for me, I'm doing everything you say, but I can't pay my rent, I can't get pregnant, I can't find a partner, whatever the problem might be, then the answer is, well, if you're doing everything I'm saying, it's because the devil's against you, and you just have to keep doing what I'm saying. It's a ploy, it's nasty, it's manipulative, it's a con artist level of manipulating people. All right, so once again, we've gotten to the end of a sermon, and the guy has not made a point. The most constructive advice he has given so far is, every morning pray and read a Bible and write down what you think God's saying. That's the only advice he's given on how to discern God's voice from the voices in your head, from the emotions and impulses that you naturally feel as a human being. He's given no actual answer to the question that he proposed at the beginning. He set this all up and then completely failed to deliver. More prosperity gospel. So, I've been the Mad Pastor. This has been Robert Morris. Is it God's voice or your thoughts? Who knows, because he's given us fuck all as answers. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.